so strong. Say the word, say the word.
Hello, and welcome to the mental health panel for UConnect tonight. We're the final panel of today, but we've got a lot of topics to cover, including how the panelists have been dealing with COVID-19, how they have been dealing with burnout and grind culture throughout their esports careers, or in just their careers and lives in general. And then our third topic will be talking about self-awareness and mental health resources, as we have a lot of people here who know a lot of those things. We'll just do some brief introductions. My name is Dragon. I'm currently a rising senior at Boston University studying psychology, and I was the ex-president of the BU Gaming Club.
Hey guys, my name is Kat, formerly from iBuyPower and Cooler Master. Currently I'm doing freelance PR consulting, one of them specifically for Tencent's Teamy Studios, doing their social media.
John Spire, I'm the Director of Partnerships at Dignitas.
No, Jackson.
Hey, well, I'm Jackson. I'm the coaching program lead of Healthy Gamer, and in my spare time, I enjoy martial arts, psychology, and being a Heartstock Silver Gen 1 Trick in League of Legends.
Oh, wow.
Oh my god.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, there's a lot. Maybe we should talk privately. My name is Jason Docton. I'm the CEO and founder of Rise Above the Disorder.
Cool. Thanks for the introductions. We'll get right into topic one, the effects of COVID-19. And so COVID-19 has obviously introduced a lot of different and very new challenges to a lot of people, including kind of balancing a work and life environment at their home. Because before, you would go to your business or your company, wherever it is, to really have like an office desk. But now you don't have that. Your office desk might be right next to your bed. Especially for those people living in like cities who have really high rent, they can't afford like multiple spaces. So how do you guys personally stay productive, and how has COVID changed your lifestyle and routine?
So I guess on my end, I was working full time pretty much throughout the entire, like the past 3 months. What's tough was that my home is very notoriously, so it's like, think of my home this way. So my home is in like an apartment complex, and there's two. It's like the only one-story apartment complex, and then you have the 2 stories right next to it. So pretty much you don't really get sunlight into your room or anything. So I just kind of felt like I was like in a little bit. I was like working with an environment that kind of felt similar to being in like a dark, cooped-up cave for a little bit. So it was a lot of like definitely life changes on my end in terms of trying to stay productive during COVID. I think one of the things that had to be done was, 1, get a better desk space, 2, improve my overall work environment in terms of like, okay, maybe this chair is a little more comfortable than the other one. 3, make sure that my windows were open at all times to make sure you get some sunlight into the room and some energy. And 4, also, pretty much spend some time talking with the outside world, whether it's like your friends on Discord or hanging out with them on, like on games and stuff like that. Like, I think it was definitely a matter of, improving the work environment as well as, like just maintaining those personal connections that you have even from afar.
So as far as my experience with Healthy Gamer goes, what's really been interesting is that Healthy Gamer, since its inception, has been mostly online. So ever since I've joined Healthy Gamer, I've been essentially working remotely from the very beginning. With that, of course, comes the natural difficulties of essentially kind of staying disciplined on your task, like making sure what needs to get done gets done. And it is very difficult, especially if there's like a big button next to your work folder called League of Legends. That makes it very difficult to stay productive, of course. With that said, one of the things that I have personally implemented to really help me to kind of stay on track is, first of all, to find a partner or a friend that I work with to essentially keep me and each other accountable. So essentially there's that accountability partner thing going on there. And the other thing is to basically set hard schedules for myself where from this time to this time I'll only be working and I will not be doing anything else. Like no League of Legends, no Reddit or YouTube videos, just strictly work. And I found that to be personally very helpful for me.
Yeah, for me, the struggle has been less about staying productive and more about staying unproductive. And I know we'll talk a little bit about grind culture in a sec, but for me, I'm a very organized type A person, and I found one of the most effective strategies for myself is really to be living by my online calendar, and that's the meetings that I have throughout the day, but it's also making sure all the time that I need off is actually blocked off. With that, it's even taking habits in the morning like meditation before I start working and really starting my day with things that are important for me. And on top of that, we have a system at Dignitas called WMIs, or really what's most important. And effectively, every day and every week, we'll set those specific goals for our respective departments and ourselves. And as long as I'm focusing on that and accomplishing those tasks, then I know once those things are completed, or once my tasks for the day are completed, regardless of time, hopefully earlier than 5 p.m., 6 p.m., I'll be able to feel accomplished and still be able to take time off.
Yeah, I think I've had a lot of the same kind of experience that you've had, John, of going into this period where everybody's at home. It's a lot harder to disconnect from the workplace. I'm physically leaving the office. When I go home, and the expectation is that the computer in front of me is really only for gaming and socializing, whereas the computer at the office is for that. So, for me, it's been a lot of really hard scheduling, which continuously gets pushed back. I think because the other side of COVID, working in mental health care, the amount of people that have reached out for services right now, especially having lost their job, lost their insurance, and needing access to free mental health care, the care that we provide, has definitely kind of pushed the envelope and really increased the need for us to be, to pretty much push ourselves and always be available.
Thank you. I think that one thing you guys brought up towards the end, John, Jason, is that finding that time to be unproductive, I guess, and make sure that your computer at home isn't always a work computer. But another aspect of kind of taking care of your mental health is social interactions. A lot of people build up their mental health with their friends they have, their family they have. Can you talk about how you guys have filled in that social void that quarantine has kind of created? And if you have any conflicts at home, how you have dealt with it?
So we're definitely living in a very interesting time, and especially with how just internet has become such a powerful tool that we can possess. It really is both a blessing and a curse. So because of COVID, a lot of the stuff that we can do to usually distract ourselves from kind of the horrific events that's been happening recently are no longer available to us due to the fact that we're all kind of constrained within our own home. And as a result, a lot of us has become a lot more sensitive and just overall exposed to, you can say, some of the more horrific recent events that has been occurring. That definitely can have a toll on a lot of us, our mental health. On the flip side, though, I do believe that the internet can also be used for great benefit to your mental health. And I think that actually kind of the healthy gamer community that I am a part of now has been a very good example of that. So for example, in the community, we have weekly group meditation sessions, and some of our moderators are even holding a cleaning call on a weekly basis where we essentially get together and we just clean our room. So through the power of the internet, we were able to essentially turn perhaps one of the most menial and dull tasks into a social occasion. So definitely the power of the internet can be quite beneficial for us.
Yeah, and I guess for me it's a little bit different. First and foremost, I'm one of the most extroverted people that I know, and a whole lot of that for me is interpersonal connection and being offline, right? Some of the things that I've been doing just to disconnect and escape the self-induced prisons that we're having to live in by remaining indoors, all, be in my car and I'll go for a drive and at least escape my scenery for a moment. And I'm not interacting with anyone. I'm nowhere around anyone. But it's at least nice to have some diversity in what I'm looking at throughout the day. That's been especially beneficial for me. Certainly video games are a crux that is wonderful. I don't mean to say that in a negative way. It's beautiful how much gaming can positively impact us otherwise being, a victim to our own thoughts and minds for being stuck up at home. But, it's really nice to just go through different mediums at times as well. If that's as simple as a phone call instead of a video game, if that's going to a common location, not being next to each other, but still having any kind of interpersonal connection, right? Seeing people offline is much more fulfilling for me, especially now than it ever has been historically. And I think there are still some ways to do that safely and having a lot of precautions in place for that. But I know, the longer I'm inside, the more important that becomes on occasion.
Yeah, it is kind of an interesting situation where I think for a lot of my life and for some of my friends, not much changed. We instead of meeting up would pretty much just log on and play League anyways or play WoW anyways. And so it's been kind of a curious thing to see how much just no longer having the opportunity to do that has been taxing. When you want to have that one-off time where you actually went out and did something, and seeing how that has escaped us is relatively frustrating and to some degree painful. But what I have really enjoyed is the amount of time when you commit to it that you can spend really socializing with your friends now, because we're almost trying to make up for that lacking feeling. So I suppose it's been really interesting to just communicate more and more with people who I otherwise would for sure play games with and socialize with, but not maybe talk to as much as I used to.
Agreed with Jason. I think COVID really definitely brought a couple of my group of friends together. I know we were usually busy on like a daily basis and stuff, even prior to COVID, but coming together and kind of bearing that burden of, this is happening in my state. This is also happening in my state too. I just had a family member and, stuff like that. Like everyone just kind of just kind of unifying together and, playing with each other and kind of acting as some sort of like, support group for each other. And it just got even stronger after COVID. And, that's also for relationships too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's super awesome that you guys have figured out ways to kind of take care of yourselves. But I'm sure this has been a very long process, as you guys are all industry leaders. You guys have went through that entire process. So we'll get into burnout and grind culture. And especially for the esports and gaming industry, which are like, as it grows, it gets increasingly competitive. How are you guys practicing self-care in that industry? And how are you creating a work-life balance for yourself, where you guys are like finding time to make sure that you are being unproductive, but at the same time, like you're getting everything that you need to get done?
So I think for the longest time, ever since college esports, especially during college esports, like I would constantly be on the grind all the time. It's like, we have the next event coming up. We have sponsorships. We have club meetings. We have all this. And that burnout. So during my senior year of high school, I was diagnosed with early onset fibromyalgia. So that's like chronic pain and fatigue. And I actually, Jason remembers this obviously, but yeah. So, and a lot of it, when you have something like that kind of happen, you take a step back and you ask yourself and you reevaluate, what are some steps I can take to make some life changes to better myself, my mental health and my physical health in general. During college, I started implementing some self-care regimens for myself, whether it's like, a game or two after work or after whatever activities after that 9 to 6, building a Gundam. I love Gundam building or model kits. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, model kits are great for your health.
It's the best Instagram too.
Literally plugging it.
All of that.
just little, you need to find, and I tell collegiate leaders and my friends too, like, you need to find some time for yourself, some self-care, and you'll realize that you find like enjoyment in like the little things in life, whether it is like those model kits or something like that. And so just, moving forward, I've just been really big on self-care. So it's like after my 9 to 6, like maybe if there's some questions, then I'll answer them. But after that, I'll be like, okay, let's go play some games or something like that. And I haven't had that issue in a few years. So it's definitely helped. Jackson.
Yeah, so in terms of burnout, the main thing that I actually personally struggle with is with communication. And for that, I would actually want to just give a quick shout out to like just the core team at Healthy Gamer, Dr. K, Mrs. K, Zach, Brendan. They've been just so incredibly helpful in supporting my process and becoming a better communicator. So up until the point I joined Healthy Gamer, whether it's in college or even at my previous day job, I've always been, you can say that I usually take on a bit of a lone wolf approach where I just try to shoulder everything myself and just hard carry all the time, even though sometimes it's actually, frankly, unnecessary in the sense that like my team is always there to help, but I usually just don't communicate my needs and wants and my what I need help with them very effectively. So as a result, I actually end up stressing myself out. I guess you can say it's in a way I was outplaying myself. But over time, what I have learned, actually, what has been really, really helpful, which is preventing burnout, is to just communicate with the team, right? So for example, there are certain things that I would have to do for my own health, such as, going to the gym, exercising, martial arts, talking with my family, for example, and I would communicate these needs with my team, and I'll tell them that, hey, like during these time, I would be preferred not to be bothered with, but if there's an emergency, of course, you can always call my cell phone. So overall, in short, one thing that I found that has been super helpful with kind of maintaining that boundary, kind of going back to that work-life balance, is to communicate with the team and maintaining that frequent communication channel.
So, for me, burnout is, I guess I see it in a very different sense. Being a founder of something or being an executive, every minute you're not working is a minute that something is not getting done. And that very mindset can be really terrifying. You imagine all of the things that should be done, all of the things that you want to do, and so you have to kind of be aggressively doing those things. At the same time, working in mental health care and seeing this happen so much, you also have that understanding that the longer and longer you do that for, the less and less capable you'll be to sustain it, and ultimately kind of crash and burn, as in burnout. So it's always that challenge. How do you balance those things? How do you feel justified in taking breaks when you feel more motivated or you feel pressured to do more? I think when you look at a challenge like that, it's always so unique to the individual person. I think there's something to be said about self-sacrifice. But ultimately, you can't really do anything if you've completely sacrificed your person. I think I oftentimes see this as well within esports. I certainly see this with a lot of the students that we treat, but with the esports players that we treat, they wake up at a fixed time. They do scrims, they do coaching sessions, they do one-to-ones, they then do more scrims, and then by the time they're finished around 5 o'clock or so, then they go and stream. And when they are finally done streaming, they crash and they start all over again. And then they reach out and they're like, "Hey, I don't feel well." And they're like, "Cool. When's the last time you took a break?" Never. So it is a huge challenge, and it's something that you'll see throughout the industry. But again, it's the more and more you commit to that kind of self-sacrifice, the less longevity you have. And ultimately, that's what we're seeing is dominating within esports. It's the old brands that are still holding strong. It's a lot of the old names that are still around and controlling a lot of things. So you have to find a way to slow yourself even just a little bit so that you can exist long enough to have the impact.
Yeah, I guess I'll add one more thing to Jason too. Especially working on the mental health side, and basically in the business, if you want to call it a business, the business of saving lives, right? It's the same pressure of the more time you're spending not focused on helping people is the more people suffering, right? So that's extremely difficult. I know I didn't put it in my introduction, but I'm also on the board of directors for Rise Above the Disorder. So Jason and I know each other very, very well. For me, again, it really still boils down to hypervigilance on schedules. The two things that I make sure to force myself into time with are two things, or three things, just for me, right? One is meditation in the morning, but in the afternoons, it's making sure I have time to play music. You guys can probably see part of a drum set behind me. And read. I mean, my reading list has been pretty extensive, and the one benefit of this pandemic is I've at least been able to go through a lot of these books, which are about efficacy and time management and just things that I want to learn. Things like board game and tabletop design. So it's some of them are quasi work related, but it's all for the pursuit of knowledge through relaxing and reading, usually outside. And that's been extremely beneficial for me.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. You guys have talked a little bit about how you guys kind of take care of yourself and prevent burnout. But are there any specific retroactive or preventative habits and measures you guys take to maintain your own mental health?
Maintain, yeah. I mean, Jackson.
So this has definitely been mentioned many times, but meditation is OP. My aunt, she runs a weekly guided meditation class for the family, actually, and it has been single-handedly one of the most helpful things for me personally. So me and the immediate family, some close friends, would just get together on Zoom, and we would just meditate together. And just kind of maintaining that weekly schedule of getting together, chatting with the family, and then meditating together has just been super helpful for my mental health. And the second thing, which is something I believe could be a bit overlooked at times, is that it is actually okay to have problems. So a lot of times when someone suspects that they may be having some issues when it comes to mental health, is a lot of times their first instinct, especially if they're high achievers, they would beat themselves up and say, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way, right? You always hear that. I shouldn't be, feeling down in the dumps. I really need to get my stuff together and get to work. And that oftentimes actually make the situation worse. So one of the things that I have learned, whether it's from my personal experience or just from my experience with helping other individuals with their mental health, is that one of the first steps that you can take that can really help you to begin your journey in improving your mental health is, if there is a problem, it is okay. You can just acknowledge it, accept it as it is, and that's actually half the battle already won.
It's beautiful, Jackson. I think one of the things that immediately comes to mind is probably what people don't necessarily see as a preventative or retroactive take. But getting into therapy is incredibly helpful. If that is something that you have access to, if that is something that you have the resources to be able to start seeing a therapist and be able to have those conversations to build that relationship where so many things can be discussed and worked through. You even see that with a lot of people who've been in therapy for a long time. Is at that point, you almost see it as maintenance. You're seeing it as a process that is really tending to your well-being. So when things do come up, you have the mental fortitude, the emotional bandwidth to address everything. So I always recommend that is something that begins and is really looked at and respected as almost the equivalent of going to the gym. You don't need to be, in a weight that you don't like for yourself to go to the gym. You can go to the gym because you want to be healthy, just like you can go to therapy because you want to be emotionally healthy.
Yeah. I think going back to one of the things Jackson remarked on earlier, for me, a lot of it boils down to communication, right? And in essence, that is a part of what therapy is and provides. That's also, if you're not comfortable seeing a therapist, something that you can speak to your friends about, and you can speak to your peers about, and you can speak to advisors about and coworkers about. I'm thankful at Dignitas, they know my propensity to perhaps work a little bit more than I should, to a point where, by basically executive order, I was forced to take, part of today and part of yesterday off after a major announcement we had. And this was non-negotiable from our CEO. And, hey, okay, I can follow that directive, right? But in the same way, much of it comes from not necessarily knowing if your feelings are ones that can fester into something more negative, or that's something that you're experiencing you're not sure how to interpret, right? And while absolutely a certified therapist is your best resource in those ways, there are still other resources you can use in the interim, or if you just don't have the comfort level in the meantime. So, by all means, reach out to people you trust in the space or advisors and talk with them about something that you're thinking about, or advice on something, or, hey, how am I doing in this scheme of things, right? I'd be happy to answer those questions for anyone. So
this is going to sound kind of random compared to everyone else, but I think, one thing that I definitely learned, especially since, one thing that I definitely learned was the importance of sleep. Like, honestly, yeah, sleep is a very big thing. And, with the fibro, if I don't get, an average 7 to 8 hours of sleep, I feel like my entire body's in pain the next morning. And, you feel like you're in a mental fog and stuff like that. And, even for the people without fibro, so my fiance is a very hardworking PhD candidate, and he always forgets to sleep. It's like he spends maybe 2 or 3 hours a day at max getting sleep. And, I always tell him, and I always stress, like, you need to sleep, to drink a cup of tea, get at least, 5 or 6, no matter how busy you are, maybe increase your sleep level. And I feel like that itself overall improves your quality of life, your mental capability, your physical capability. Like, sleep is just so important. And I know that might sound like a difficult task for a lot of people in chat, like a lot of college students and a lot of hardworking people and stuff. It's hard, but trust me, like, you feel so much better at the end of the day.
Yeah, if I can chime in specifically on sleep, right?
Sure.
On my team especially, I would rather have someone who can really work effectively and efficiently for 3 hours and be half productive for 9. Right?
Yeah.
So I would so much rather someone take care of themselves and take care of their bodies so that they can operate their mind at the highest level.
Exactly.
I think something that's super difficult is people, they hear a lot about these mental resources, but they really don't know how to access them, or they still kind of feel uncomfortable about asking where they can find it or like what they should use. So Kat and John, if you guys could share what you're comfortable with, but tell us a bit about the mental resources you guys have used personally, and then Jackson and Jason, if you guys could talk about Healthy Gamer and Rise Above the Disorder.
Sure.
That would be awesome.
I could go first. So the biggest resource that I definitely used was going through RAD's program, the therapy finder. You pair up with you pair up with a care specialist through RAD, and then they help you, like, based on your criteria. So for example, on my end, it was like, so I get anxiety over my health, obviously, and sometimes when I do get the pains, I get panic. So I do have like a mild panic disorder, And I put all of that in the application to RAD, or to, back then it was anxiety gaming, but to RAD. Yeah. And then sit down with the care specialists, and then you get paired on, the type of therapy and the type of options available to you around the area. There's many, people don't realize this sometimes, but there's many, many different types of therapy, many different types. And, it's not a one size fits all situation. There's a lot of different resources and a lot of different ways to improve your overall mental health, and RAD definitely helped in that aspect, at least for me.
Yeah, I'm going to echo a very similar sentiment. Obviously, RAD has been a wonderful resource for myself as well. There was a period with a former employer that I had been so convinced of my inefficacy and inability to create any kind of decision making that it really spawned in me a pretty severe anxiety that led to panic attacks and really just me hiding under my desk at times. So going to therapy was tremendously helpful for me, and I took a very strange step after, which was, to convince myself that I could be effective in decision making. I fled to Thailand for a couple of weeks, and I just didn't schedule anything. So every single day I had to make effective decisions and travel to different cities, and it was absolutely wonderful. Wouldn't recommend under my circumstances, but would recommend a trip. But yeah, RAD has really been the core of a lot of my mental health struggles and successes even. So that's why I've been so dedicated to giving back to them and helping others.
Awesome. I know that, Jackson, you work with Healthy Gamer, which is a pretty new organization addressing video game addiction. I know you guys do a lot more other than that now. But could you talk specifically about how Healthy Gamer has helped people overcome that addiction and other confidence issues they've had?
Oh boy, Dragon, before I start, I need you to hold me accountable and just keep my internal academic in check, because damn, there's so much to talk about this. So when we initially started with Healthy Gamer, our main focus was, as you said, on video game addiction. But over time, as we as an organization, of course, Dr. K, we talk to more and more gamers, what we have really began to realize is that video game addiction, more often than not, is really the surface problem of something that is way more complex and deep-rooted than just simply, oh, this darn kid plays too much video games. So the one thing that we noticed that was just been really fascinating, just talking to gamers about their individual experiences with video games, is that for every story that we hear about how video game has ruined a gamer's life, there is another one that is, if it weren't for video games, the gamer, per verbatim, would not be there. So what we have really discovered is that video game is not an inherently evil thing. Yeah, sure, you can go into conversations about predatory practices and all that, and that's a completely separate topic. But video game itself is not inherently evil, and it actually has the very many benefits. For example, actually recently there's been a game that is now an officially prescribable form of treatment for ADHD, for example. What is really at the crux of it is, Dragon, as you mentioned, there's a whole other variety of mental health issues that gamers may struggle with, some of which can be clinical, such as depression, anxiety. But more importantly, what we discovered is that there's just various life skills that a lot of gamers frankly need help with. So social skills, how to get into a relationship, how to find a GF instead of trying to buy one on RuneScape, how to be able to get a job, right? Write a resume, essentially doing all these things. And one of the things that we here at Healthy Gamer has just been incredibly helpful is to provide a community that is supportive, that is able to help facilitate that process to help the gamer to become a healthy gamer.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and I think. It means a lot that I'm speaking amongst people that I've built relationships with over the years and who have trusted me to help and be involved in their life in that very unique way. It's almost unfortunate that our system is temporarily closed as we like wrap up some grants and reopen next week. But that is the nature of our resource. To communicate what exactly the resource that RAD is. RAD is effectively a universal mental health care system created and sustained within the gaming community. We started with this idea of nobody should be denied mental health care because they can't afford it. Nobody should be held back from these resources because they don't have insurance. And if we can just band together, we could remove that as an issue and remove that barrier indefinitely. And so that's what we've been doing. Some people utilize, our kind of first program, which is just finding a great therapist is really, really challenging. And so we try our best to find a good therapist. And sometimes it takes a couple of tries. Sometimes it hits the first time, and that's great. And then probably the program we're more increasingly excited about and flexing the most these days is, just the free mental health care, being able to cover the cost of mental health services, whether that's medication or psychotherapy or group or, even transportation. I approved somebody for cannabis not that long ago because it was, a core part of their treatment and important for them. And so that's really the resource that RAD provides. And certainly, going into next week, since we're onboarding a handful of more social workers to join the team, that resource will open up and be available for everybody. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. As we're waiting for Q&A questions, I don't know if you guys want to touch briefly upon, I guess, especially in current quarantine environment where screen time is so, as John was kind of talking about, there's so much screen time and gaming becomes so easy. At what point does gaming become addictive and unhealthy? And how do you find that balance of keeping it productive or keeping it a social activity and something good for your mental health?
Oh no.
So to me, I think the fine line, just to answer briefly first, right, is the moment it starts inhibiting you from productivity in other places of your life, and that can be taken severely as in oh man, I ate dinner 30 minutes later than I intended to. I don't mean quite as simple as that, but the moment you really start neglecting to eat meals altogether, or you just get so swept up in grinding to never get out of silver, Jackson, that an entire day goes by. Yeah, I fired some shots. I'm sorry.
Our system right away, John.
No, but yeah, I think it's about that fine line, right? And really, it's making sure you don't lose yourself in any kind of habit that becomes overwhelming and detracts you from other things that are important. And I think the reason that gaming gets addictive is actually one of the best things about gaming is that it's also an escape, right? And it's a social magnet, avenue, sandbox to stay connected, especially in COVID-19, with the people that you love and care about so much, right? I don't think any of that's really possible without some form of screen at this point, except for the people that you live with. So it's, to me, as long as there is that limit of wow, I'm only getting 2 hours of sleep, 3 hours of sleep, or now I'm only eating once, if best, a day, and it's usually at 11 p.m. and it's whatever place is open instead of cooking something, right? The moment you start noticing some of these things in you is the moment for some introspection on your habits.
I see.
And I know I said short. That wasn't short. Great.
Oh boy. Okay, I'll do my best to provide an abridged version because, as I said before, Dragon, my inner academic is hard to keep in control of. But here at Healthy Gamer, to really just second what John was saying, it really boils down to this. If it is causing problems, then it is a problem. And to really simplify it, I can we can really just divide the affected areas into 4 areas. So there's physical health, mental health, social health, and occupational health. If you are not getting the sleep that you need, if you're missing meals, if you're noticing that you're raging because you're tilting and you just can't find that you can't stop, if you're running into relationship problems or family problems because of your gaming habits, or of course if you can't function in the sense that like you're failing your grades, you're slacking off at work, and you're on the brink of getting fired, like that's kind of where gaming becomes a problem. But with that being said, I also definitely agree with what John is saying in the sense that like on the surface, it may seem like that game is kind of the source of all of that. And then usually the response to that, oh, just stop playing video games for it. But what actually is really at stake here and what we really need to actually do whether it's helping someone with a gaming problem or if we ourselves have a gaming problem, is really first seek to understand, because video game is helping us with something, even if right now it seems like it's the problem. Maybe it is a form of escapism. Maybe it is our means, especially now with COVID, our means of socially interacting with others, like with our online friends. Or maybe it is a means for us to gain that sense of achievement, which we may not get from other sources in real life.
Right.
So really to begin to resolve that, really the most important step first is to understand the root of the problem.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think one of the things that I heard John say that was really key was the second that it becomes a problem, the second that it starts to interact with your daily life is when we identify it. I remember when I was in undergrad, I had asked one of my psych professors, when does depression or anxiety or some of these other issues become a disorder at the level of disorder? And that was his kind of one sentence response: when it interrupts your daily life. In gaming, it's funny enough, Jackson, mentioned that was kind of Healthy Gamers collective experiences, that typically, it wasn't so much that people were addicted to games as there were issues that were underlying and leading them to escape through gaming. We kind of had a long defense of this to the World Health Organization years back when they were making that decision, because we had saw much of the same. The reality of the tens of thousands of people who have been through our program was these people aren't addicted to games. Like they're depressed, they're anxious, they're stressed, they're fighting in a world where they feel like there is no success for them, there is no reward, and they're doing whatever they can to get away from that. If you're sitting there and it's your work day and you have a bunch of emails, but you queue up again and say, well, I'm going to do the email after work, or I'm going to do the email after this game, and then you look at the email and you're like, yeah, well, I'm going to play another game. Somebody would say that that's problematic gaming behavior. I would say, what's going on that's leading you to need this right now. And one of my favorite addiction psychiatrists would once say, I don't ask why. I don't ask what the addiction is. I ask what is the problem, and really try and build from there. Problematic gaming is a symptom of a greater issue. So,
I think alongside gaming, kind of off topic, but there's been a lot of other, I guess, issues that have arisen in like society recently, and so a lot of people have been protesting, whether that's like making sure that people stay indoors, or the racial inequalities, or in esports right now, the sexual harassment accusations. So is it okay to take time for yourself in lieu of the craziness of the COVID-19 and social injustices that are happening currently?
Absolutely. And I think I'm saying this coming from the perspective of someone that's constantly on social media all the time, just because it's my job to do so. And I'm pretty much always exposed, always, like, there's just never any time for me pretty much to kind of take a break from social media, or like put down the Twitter, or like, put down the Facebook, like people say. It's pretty much look at everything, you see everything happen, and it gets really scary. It gets really scary to, constantly be on that and see, oh no, like the cases are going up significantly. What do you do when you're like, for example, I'm high risk, so it's like, what do you do? What kind of, I don't know, it's just a lot of stuff. It's good to stay informed, but it's also good to take time off. And this could probably be some advice I can give myself too. It's like, it's good to take time off for yourself. I think it's okay to play a game, or it's okay to, going back to the topic of self-care we discussed earlier, like it's okay to do those things for yourself, especially during these times. It's a very stressful time, but also please make sure to stay informed. Don't stay ignorant to any issues that are going on either. It's always good to stay informed and see how you can not only help yourself, but also help the others around you too.
Yeah, to answer this first strictly from a business executive answer, the most valuable and powerful resource for any business, any company, is its employees. And if you as an employee aren't afforded the capability to take care of yourself, then your company's failed. Mm-hmm. So even if it's strictly, you think you work for a very greedy person or whatever that is, and they need you to deliver or be effective or whatever that may be, that company can't run without employees in good form and in good mental to be able to do their jobs effectively and efficiently, right? So that's important. That said, part of my job as a manager, I have a lot of people under me, is I have to stay pretty in tune with everything going on in the Twitterverse and their lives. And I'm very familiar with the term doom scrolling that I've discovered this week, which is effectively, hey, you get up, you go to Twitter and you see something negative, and then you scroll to continue seeing more negativity, and then you scroll with the anticipation that you will continue to find more negativity, and it definitely dampens your mental and your day, right? To the same degree, I want to have awareness so I can also know what can be affecting people on my team, so I can fend against or provide them more time to recover on things. I know certain members of my staff have been affected by some of the most recent stories surrounding some of the harassment and abuse from content creators and Twitch and so on. And if I know that they're tweeting something or something's affecting them until 2-3 in the morning, I don't want them to start at 9. I want them to start when they're ready. So it's important to focus on having those resources. It's absolutely crucial to take time for yourself. I'm proud that my organization recognizes that. I'm proud that my organization wants to not sit idly by on a lot of these topics. We're pretty outspoken, or we speak actively on a lot of the topics that have been plaguing the world as of late, and I'm glad to be part of an organization that wants to stand for something and be on the right side of history in many ways. But also your personnel capital, if you want to say it in crude business terms, but the people that comprise of any company are the most important things, and you are your most valuable resource. So you should treat yourself as such.
Yeah, that's very well said, John. And really, to tie this in with the topic of the panel which is about mental health. First of all, I'm just so glad to see that many people have been just frankly very outspoken about a lot of the injustices that has just been happening around the nation. With that said, I can also see how it has begun to really negatively impact the mental health of just whether it's my close friends, or in some cases, some of my online friends has also been negatively impacted. And I really would like to emphasize that it is really important that you speak up, and especially if it's something that affects you as an individual, or it's something that affects those that you love and care about, definitely speak up. It is also, however, very important that you take care of yourself while do so. I'm sure this is news to no one, but social media sometimes can be quite toxic, the overall environment. And it's very easy to kind of lose yourself in the negativity and think that the world is doomed, there is no hope. But it is important to also realize that, amidst that negativity, there is really that positive force that is driving behind it, even though sometimes we can go into a rabbit hole about the psychological phenomena around it, of course. But at the end of the day, everyone is trying to do what in their mind is the right thing to do. And it is just really important for us to really take care of yourselves while we're at it.
Yeah, where we are in the world, it's a whirlwind. You got hit with COVID, and suddenly everything that you did changed, in the way you had to approach life and approach people and approach the world around you changed. And as we were starting to kind of push the boundaries of how long we could see this information, these numbers skyrocketing, these bodies popping up everywhere, and more and more instances of neglect and politics being pushed into it, you become fatigued. You and you're being told you have to act. You're being told that this is important and you need to respond now. And you're being told exactly how to respond at times, and all of this is something that really puts a lot of pressure on you. And just as that hit its maximum, we took a look and we realized that who are the majority of people that are dying to this? Interesting. Yeah, we're still struggling with this inequality that is systematically built into everything that we stand on, and we need to fight back against this. Now is the time where we need to stand and do something and be about this, and really draw those lines between who's here and wants this world to be a better place, and who wants to hold it back and keep it this normalcy that we have spent the last few months fighting to change. And as we are still working through that, then suddenly the tone shifts and Mixer collapses, and then the tone shifts again, and now it's a time where women are finding power and speaking out again, and really claiming that they should be in this space, but people are stopping them from being in this space. The fear is always that these things come up as trends, when in reality the fight is so critical. And we can't give up on any of these things. We need to be diligent about COVID. We need to be pushing for social equality, and we need to be outing these situations and removing these gatekeepers within an industry, and stop asking the question of why aren't there more women within gaming and esports, and start pointing the finger and saying that's why, and being responsive. But again, if we're seeing it as a trend, that becomes exhausting. And if we're seeing it as constantly attacking the people that we love and the people around us, that becomes exhausting. And so what comes to mind to me is finding a way to stay informed through social media, but really potentially even gating the time spent on that. Because to some degree, everybody is counting on us to remain refreshed and able to keep being involved. And to an even greater degree, there are people counting on you giving up and being overwhelmed and letting it blow over so that they can get a pass. And that's not what we can afford to do right now. We can't afford to regress. So if you're scrolling through social media and it's starting to get overwhelming, be mindful of it. Remind yourself that what you're doing is helpful. But I'm going to take a break for now, for today, for the week, and then return again and be about it again and be active in it again.
I think that social media, a lot of times you see other people doing all these things and you kind of feel inadequate because you feel like you're not doing enough. I know John's super excited to talk about this, but how would you personally deal with imposter syndrome? Like, how do you kind of like embrace that you're not inadequate, and how do you deal with all those like instances on social media where people are like, oh, I'm in Hawaii, but you're like at home? Like, how do you deal with that sort of like, I don't say toxicity, but toxicity? Also, whoever speaks that decides to speak first, if you could give a brief definition of what imposter syndrome is, that'd be appreciated.
Jason?
Oh, is that me? I didn't. Maybe I missed it in the Skype. Yeah, imposter syndrome. Funny enough, I've done a couple of videos on this now. Imposter syndrome to me is when you feel that you do not deserve what you have ultimately achieved, and I like to define it in that positive context. Because that inherently is already attacking the idea of imposter syndrome. The problem of imposter syndrome that we tend to see is that it's a cycle. You get caught in this cycle. You go and you are prompted with some kind of reward function, with something that is going to yield some kind of reward, and then you find yourself either procrastinating or over preparing. If you're procrastinating that's pretty obvious. That's when you just keep queuing and queuing and queuing, and you never end up getting to something, and then you eventually it gets rushed and you get it done, and you're like, yeah, I just got lucky. Like, I'm dumb. I can't believe that happened. And people are like, hey, you still did a good job, and you're just like, yeah, I don't think so. And then it cycles back again. The one that people often don't identify is the overpreparedness. This is somebody who's, yeah, I really want to maybe ask for a raise. So I'm going to Google search, and I'm going to read a million articles, and I'm going to go through and ask everybody I know, and I'm going to spend so much time preparing while simultaneously just avoiding actually doing it. Though when you see those and can identify those, what you're talking about is imposter syndrome. It is probably one of the more common things that we treat, especially when it's within the industry. And I guess the main benefit of when we come across it is it's pretty well treated, pretty well responds to psychotherapy. And ultimately, once that kind of veil is removed, people find themselves no longer dealing with kind of the side symptoms of it all, kind of the different symptoms of depression or anxiety that tend to go hand in hand with imposter syndrome. For me, there's definitely some coaching tactics that people tend to employ, and that certainly can be helpful depending on the level of the imposter syndrome. When it gets to a point of potentially needing to see a therapist to address imposter syndrome, that's usually when I've seen some kind of like collapse in self-esteem, some kind of really long existing imposter syndrome, like I've been this way for many, many years, things that are no longer going to be, if somebody just feeds me the right advice and the right routine, I can change, but I might actually need something like a CBT, a more like mechanical style of change within the brain might be necessary.
Yeah, and really echoing on what Jason said, having imposter syndrome, like just personally as an ADC main, like just resonated with that so much. Especially, it's having imposter syndrome is basically akin to having a 10-0 support and you're like 0-0. Right? I don't know if you guys seen that meme.
Great analogy.
Buff Soraka. Yeah. But to really add on that, one of the big things that kind of goes hand in hand with imposter syndrome is actually the Dunning-Kruger effect. So ironically, if you suffer from imposter syndrome, it actually means that you're really getting somewhere. Because the Dunning-Kruger effect, in short, is when you know that you don't know a lot. And what makes you feel like you're really inadequate, but actually you are a lot more competent than you imagine yourself to be. It is actually the opposite when you think you know everything when you're just starting out. Like that's where the problem actually lies. So imposter syndrome, it could actually be a good thing, though of course, having it is no fun, right? So as far as some strategies that I have personally implemented to kind of deal with that is really just accept that you feel inadequate. Like I've said, mentioned before, acceptance is like kind of half the battle already won. And the second step is you can actually find people that you trust and just kind of talk about it, right? Because it really serves you no good if you just bottle it up and you kind of just keep it to yourself. Like at the end of the day, once again, it's about communication, right? Talking about these problems with the people that you care about, people you know who's got your back and will support you.
Yeah, I'd say for me, anytime I have any form of depressive episode, it is 1000% stemming from imposter syndrome. And, you know, I've worked in esports for over a decade. I've worked for many of the top organizations in the world. I've been poached 100% of those jobs. I haven't actually applied, but no one is safe from harmful thoughts and negative feelings, right? You know, for me, it's tough, and it's really interesting thinking on it logically. Like, hey, I'm able to bring in, you know, partnerships and willing to have brands spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on the respective teams I'm working with, but you know, that's not me. It's a fluke. It's the team I'm working for that provides that value, not me, right? It's something that I face often. That's just the reality of it. The things that I do, you know, one, over the course of the last decade, I've kept basically a bookshelf full of just some of the things I've accumulated in traveling all over the world. Some of the things that I'm proud of from a specific partnership or an ad campaign that I did, or a jersey or whatever, just things that I can, you know, physically look at or tangibly, you know, feel and see, wow, like, regardless of how I feel right at this moment, I can look at these things and see that I have, in fact, accomplished a large variety of things, and many of them are important. You know, and the strongest advice that I have for anyone who's dealing with these things is really just to find one thing to accomplish, one easy, simple task, and hone in and hyper focus on just that one thing. And that can be as simple as finishing one document or one paragraph of one document or whatever it is that you're doing. But once you accomplish that goal, you recognize, hey, I've accomplished something. I've set something out to do, and I've met that goal. Maybe I'm not worthless. Maybe I have the capability to do something. I just proved that. So, you know, those are simple strategies, but they're effective. I mean, no one is safe from feeling negative things at times, and certainly some people have a higher propensity than others. But the best you can do is recognize simple things that you can work toward and step forward, so you don't fall into a stagnant state, or worse, you know, go down a regressive rabbit hole of feeling terrible.
Well, thank you all for coming and speaking today. You guys have provided a lot of resources, a lot of knowledge, a lot of the things you guys do to take care of your mental health. And I'm sure it's helped a lot of the people watching. Are going to be doing, we'll be posting the links for Healthy Gamer and RAD inside the Twitch stream. So if you guys are interested in learning more about those resources, definitely check them out. Thank you to everyone who joined our stream today. Thanks for everyone who came out and watched. And we'll be having an MSI giveaway after the panel. And come back tomorrow for another day of awesome speakers starting at 4 p.m. PST. And if you haven't done so yet, join the UConnect events Discord. Thanks for everyone who joined us today, and thank you guys for speaking.